Welcome back to America's Forum. I'm J.D. Hayworth. Former United States Ambassador to the United Nations, John Bolton, continues to blister the Obama administration in the wake of Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel's plan to reduce the United States military to pre-World War II levels. Ambassador Bolton, long a critic of what he calls the current president's ineffective foreign policy, has said he believes Mr. Obama is actively trying to diminish the power of the United States. He's also said that America will ultimately pay the price for having a weak and inattentive president. Ambassador John Bolton joining us by phone today. Ambassador, I appreciate your time. The president's inattentiveness, is it more an attitude that he possesses, a kind of notion saying to foreign leaders, you're okay, your regime is okay, but the U.S. has some problems? Is that the president's undergirding philosophy?
Well, I think he just, President Obama simply doesn't give priority to U.S. national security affairs the way really every president in a long line, Republican and Democrat alike, since Franklin Roosevelt, have given priority to international affairs. I think the president told us in the 2008 campaign that his objective was, these are his words, to fundamentally transform America. And international affairs, foreign and defense policy get in the way of what his priorities are. So much in the same way that soybean subsidies might not rouse the highest interest of the Secretary of Defense, in President Obama's case, the Defense Department doesn't rouse his interest as it should, and that is the fundamental problem. I think there's an equal problem in that Republicans have not explained adequately to the American people why the president's failure to pay attention to threats and emerging threats in the rest of the world puts the country in greater danger. I think there's almost failure across the board in Washington not to have our national leaders talking about some of these international threats that we face.
So again, on the part of the president, it is not benign neglect, but you fault some in the GOP for taking a look, paying attention too closely to the polls, and not making the case for a strong national defense. You basically, like so many people are saying, both parties have been ineffective in dealing with this question.
Yeah, I think that the conventional wisdom of the political operatives is that nobody cares about foreign policy. There are no votes in it. People don't think it affects their daily lives. Well, in fact, what happens internationally very much affects people's daily lives, as anybody who ever fills the gas tank up in their car could tell you by looking at the price of oil, and that's just one of many, many examples. So I think, just from a crass political point of view, there's real advantage for the Republican Party in stressing that they remain the party of national security, because the Democrats don't have a national security wing left in their party anymore. But when neither the president nor the opposition talk about the importance of foreign and defense policy, it's no surprise the American people, who are very practical, who expect their leaders to tell them when these problems exist, turn to other things. And I think that by not paying attention to these threats, it leaves us more vulnerable.
Ambassador Bolton, I'm joined here in studio by Dave Padden of Newsmax magazine, who's got a couple of questions for you.
So, Ambassador, I was very interested that you feel that down the road in the future, Americans may have to pay a pretty big price for this sort of voting present but not really being active on the part of President Obama in terms of our national defense. Can you give us some specifics? What is your concern specifically that may be a big price that the United States has to pay?
Well, you have, at the strategic level, we can see now Russia pushing to regain hegemony in the space of the former Soviet Union, using its oil and natural gas resources today to pressure Ukraine, but tomorrow to pressure Western Europe. We see China making assertive, almost belligerent territorial claims in the East and South China Sea that would threaten trade routes for key American allies and economic partners like Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, the countries of Southeast Asia. We see the proliferation of nuclear weapons by countries like North Korea and aspirants like Iran. endangering security, not just in their respective geographical regions, but on a global basis, and the threat of international terrorism, Al-Qaeda, diversified and resurgent in many, many places around North Africa and the Middle East, all pose significant risks to the United States, and not talking about them, acting as though they don't exist, not trying to deal with them, proposing defense budgets that are utterly inadequate, simply increase the level of difficulty for the United States when the challenges that become imminent. And I think that a successor administration is going to find itself gravely weakened by the Obama administration's policies, which will have extended over 8 years of budget cuts and misdirected policy, much as Ronald Reagan had a huge task to rebuild American national security after just 4 years of Jimmy Carter.
We'll put this in a historical sort of context for us. Is there an example, in your view, of an American president who has had a less assertive, more weak approach to American strength and defense abroad? Is there any similar example?
Not in the 20th century. I really think that Obama's indifference to international affairs and the way he has undercut friends and allies, not come to their support when necessary, the way he has misanalyzed important developments like the Arab Spring, underplaying the continued strength of international terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda, and certainly paying essentially no attention to the grand strategies of Russia and China, all point in the wrong direction. And I think there's an underlying ideological reason for it. I think the president believes that American strength is actually a causal factor for international instability. He thinks we're too strong, too assertive, too much in the world, and therefore that the solution is a declining American power, a more inward-looking the United States, and that because we're less in the world, there'll be less provocation and more international stability. I think that's like looking at the world through the wrong end of the telescope, but I think that is what underpins Obama's policy.
And John, as we talk about what's unfolding in the world right now in the Ukraine, I'm curious in your perception of the Russian Federation. Is it really more accurate now to call Russia the neo-Soviet Union, given what Mr. Putin is up to? Is he out to resurrect the old USSR?
Well, I don't think he's out to resurrect a communist, ideologically communist USSR, but I do think he's out to reestablish Russian hegemony within the space of the former Soviet Union. In some cases, if he could actually expand back out to those borders, he might be interested in doing it. But his short-term objective, certainly, and Ukraine is a perfect example, is that he wants Russia dominant. He wants to minimize the influence of the West because of the continuing economic importance of Ukraine and because of its strategic importance, lying as it does to the west of Russia's frontier with NATO, between the frontier of the western frontier of Russia and the eastern border of NATO. So he's treating it as a very strategically significant country, even though our president has said that he doesn't see that we're in competition with Russia, and he doesn't see this as moving around pieces on a Cold War chessboard.
Ambassador Bolton, we thank you for your comments, really appreciate your insights, and look forward to talking to you again quite soon. Well, we would like you to weigh